Berlin, February 25th, 1933. He's standing outside a welfare office in Berlin. It's cold and he's hungry. His eyes are bad. Everything's blurry. It's been like that for years since they got doused with lime at a construction site back in Holland. Marinus van der Lubbe is 24 years old. He's a Dutch bricklayer with no job, no money, and a head full of ideas about revolution. He pulls out matches and some fire lighters. You know, those little chemical blocks that you use to start a barbecue. He's going to burn this building down as a protest, to wake up people. He finds a dark corner and lights a fire. Small blue flames turn orange as the fire begins to spread. His eyes widen with excitement, but then the flames start to shrink and flicker out. And then, nothing. The building doesn't burn. He tries again at a town hall, working quickly in the shadows, but it's the same result. A pathetic little fire that goes nowhere before dying completely. He tries a third time at a palace. He's desperate now, but again he fails. The fire just won't take. This half-blind Dutch kid can't even succeed at arson. 2 days later, February 27, 1933, it's around 9 p.m. The Reichstag, the German parliament, the most important building in the country, is completely engulfed in massive flames. The entire structure is burning out of control. Flames shoot through the roof and light up the night sky. It's spectacular and unstoppable. Marinus van der Lubbe is found inside the building, half naked, covered in sweat and soot, breathing heavily. He doesn't resist arrest at all. In fact, he confesses immediately and without hesitation. He says, "I did it alone, as a protest." Within hours, this fire will be used to dismantle democracy in Germany. Civil rights will be suspended. Thousands will be arrested without charge, and the opposition parties will be crushed. The Nazis will call van der Lubbe a communist, a terrorist, and the face of international conspiracy. His own lawyers will call him mentally disabled, a patsy who was manipulated. Historians will argue about what really happened that night. But here is what doesn't make sense. So a guy who earlier that night failed to burn down a welfare office, built mostly with wood, somehow torched the heavily secured Reichstag, a massive building of glass, brick, and concrete, in under 20 minutes. Either he got incredibly lucky or someone made sure this particular fire would work. I don't believe in that kind of luck. This is a story of how a Dutch drifter from Leiden either changed history or was used to change it. Marinus van der Lubbe was born in Leiden in 1909. His father sold fruit from a cart to make ends meet. His mother died when he was only 12 years old. By age 13, he was already working as a bricklayer's apprentice, learning the trade. Around age 16, he got lime in his eyes at a construction site. It partially blinded him, and his eyesight would continue to deteriorate for the rest of his short life. By his early 20s, he was essentially unemployed and drifting across Europe with almost no money. He slept rough and did odd jobs when he could find them. He barely scraped by. He was a communist, but not the organized kind. No party membership, no cell meeting, just a working-class kid who felt cheated by the system and was angry about it. His friends described him as intense, impulsive. He was prone to grand gestures that made no sense. In 1933, he decides to hitchhike to Berlin. He was going to protest unemployment by setting government buildings on fire. In Germany. Now think about that for a second. You're a Dutch worker who's angry about conditions in Holland. So you travel to a different country and burn down their parliament. Historians who argue van der Lubbe acted alone will tell you he was impulsive, that he thought a dramatic gesture would spark an international revolution, and that radicals don't always make rational sense. But here's what's strange about that explanation. Van der Lubbe had already tried this strategy before the Reichstag. Remember those 3 fires we just watched him fail at? That was 2 days before the Reichstag fire. So if he was just a lone arsonist with revolutionary fantasies, why did those fires go nowhere? But the Reichstag, the most important building in Germany, crawling with security, somehow succeeded spectacularly. Either van der Lubbe got extremely lucky on his fourth try, or someone made sure this particular fire would work. The official story requires you to believe a half-blind Dutch drifter who couldn't set fire to kindle doused in gasoline somehow managed to engulf the entire Reichstag in flames in under 20 minutes. I find that hard to believe. February 27th, shortly after 9 p.m., multiple witnesses see van der Lubbe near the Reichstag building. He's carrying those same little fire starters. He forces his way into the building through a window. Within minutes, flames are visible inside the structure. By 9:20 p.m., fire trucks arrive at the scene. The building is already fully engulfed in flames. The Reichstag main chamber and the domed hall are in complete inferno. Police find van der Lubbe inside the building at 9:25. Fire started around 9:03. It's only 22 minutes, and the entire building is almost gone. As we stated earlier, he just sits there with a pocket full of fire starters. He makes no attempt to flee. He's meek as a lamb as he's led out to the patrol car. Something doesn't add up, though. Experts calculated that to set a fire that spread that quickly through a building that size, you need multiple points of ignition and accelerants. It would take several people working in sync. And if you believe that, you also have to believe that van der Lubbe could not have done it alone. Investigators found tunnels connecting the Reichstag to other government buildings, tunnel that stormtroopers had access to. Witnesses reported seeing people running from the building before van der Lubbe was arrested. But the official story was simple and clean. One Dutch kid acted completely alone. The claim that van der Lubbe supported over and over again. I did it alone, he says. He even started a hunger strike when people didn't believe him. Now, that's strange behavior for someone who supposedly acted alone. If you really did it all by yourself, you'd simply say so once or twice. You wouldn't care if anybody believed you or not. But if someone told you, stay quiet, take the fall, you're helping the revolution, then that behavior makes perfect sense. You're protecting the cause. Before we get to what the Nazis did with this fire, you need to understand where Germany was politically at this moment. 4 weeks earlier, January 30th, Adolf Hitler had become the Chancellor of Germany. But he wasn't a dictator yet, not even a little bit. Germany was still a democracy. There was still a functioning parliament, still civil rights protected by law, still parties that could challenge him. Hitler had power, but he had serious limits. And he didn't like that, not one bit. The Nazis had been waiting for this moment as an excuse to sweep away all those democratic obstacles that stood in their way. And on February 27th, they got exactly what they needed. Within hours of the Reichstag fire, Hitler and Hermann Göring arrived at the scene personally. Hitler immediately declared this was proof of a communist plot to overthrow the government. By the next morning, February 28, less than 12 hours after the fire started, President Hindenburg signed the Reichstag fire decree. It suspended freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the right to assembly. It allowed the government to arrest anyone and hold them indefinitely without charges, without trial. Basically, it was martial law. Except it never ended. This emergency decree stayed in effect for the entire duration of the Third Reich. Think about how fast that happened. A building burns on Monday night. By Tuesday morning, civil rights are completely gone. The mainstream historical explanation is that the Nazis were already planning a crackdown on communists anyway and simply exploited the fire when it happened. They supposedly had these emergency powers ready to go, just waiting for any excuse to use them. And maybe that's true, but it requires you to believe that van der Lubbe, who couldn't set fire to a barn full of hay, just happened to give them the perfect excuse at exactly the right moment in the most convenient way possible. Within days, 4,000 people were arrested, communists, socialists, media employees, and anyone else who the Nazis didn't like. The The fire gave them the perfect cover they needed. Then on March 23rd, less than a month after the fire, the Nazis pushed through the Enabling Act. This law allowed Hitler to pass legislation without the Reichstag approval at all. He could now make laws all by himself. In just 4 weeks, Hitler went from chancellor with constitutional limits to a dictator with unlimited power. And the fire was the excuse that made it all legally possible. And at the center of it all was this half-blind Dutch kid who kept insisting that he did it alone. Leipzig Courthouse, September 1933. Van der Lubbe is on trial along with 4 other communists the Nazis tried to link to the fire. The prosecution wanted desperately to prove an international communist conspiracy. But there was no evidence. The other 4 defendants had solid alibis. There was no connection to Van der Lubbe, no physical evidence tying any of them to the scene. Meanwhile, Van der Lubbe kept confessing. Witnesses say he seemed detached during the trial, almost drugged. He stared blankly at the nothing and was even drooling during his own testimony. His lawyers argued that he was mentally challenged and possibly being drugged by his captors. The court found the other 4 defendants not guilty and released them. But Van der Lubbe was found guilty. He received a death sentence. He was beheaded by a guillotine on January 10th, 1934. He was only 24 years old. But there's more. While the Leipzig trial was happening, something remarkable occurred in London. A group of international lawyers held a counter-trial, a mock tribunal to examine all the evidence the German court was ignoring. The conclusion was that Van der Lubbe could not have set that fire alone. It was physically impossible. The speed of the blaze, the multiple ignition points, the accelerants needed, it could not have been done by one person with a book of matches. They suspected that the Nazi paramilitary had used those underground tunnels to preset the fire with gasoline and then let Van der Lubbe take the fall. But this was just a symbolic trial with no legal authority. The world was watching Germany, but nobody intervened to stop what was happening. For decades, historians argued about what really happened that night. Most concluded that Van der Lubbe acted alone and the Nazis simply got lucky. That they exploited a crisis they didn't actually create. But then in 2019, 86 years after the fire, a document surfaced that changed the entire conversation. A 1955 sworn affidavit from a former SA member named Hans Martin Lennox. It was found hidden in the papers of Fritz Tobias, the very historian who'd spent decades arguing that Van der Lubbe acted alone. In the affidavit, Lennox claims that he and his SA squad were ordered to drive Van der Lubbe to the Reichstag that night. When they arrived, the building was already on fire. Lemming said he and his fellow SA members protested Van der Lubbe's arrest because they were convinced he could not have been the arsonist. The Reichstag was already burning when they dropped him off. He claimed they were detained by superiors, forced to sign papers denying any knowledge of what happened, and that most anyone with knowledge of the real events was later executed. Lenin said he had to escape to Czechoslovakia to survive. So why did it take 64 years for this testimony to become public? Well, that's because Fritz Tobias, the man who built his entire career on the premise that Van der Lubbe acted alone, had it the whole time and never mentioned it to anyone. Now, Lennings gave testimony 22 years after the event. He had every reason to, when it was safe, blame the Nazis. They'd executed his former colleagues and had run him out of the country. So, is he credible? Can we trust him? Honestly, we don't know for certain. Maybe he's telling the truth, and that's exactly why Tobias hid his testimony for decades. Or maybe he's a former Nazi trying to get even with the party that betrayed him. What we do know is this: his account matches the physical evidence better than the official story ever did. So here's what we know for certain. The Reichstag burned, Van der Lubbe was there, and he confessed. The Nazis used the fire to give Hitler powers that destroyed democracy in Germany, and by doing so lit the spark for World War II. And here's what doesn't add up. A Dutch communist travels to Germany to burn down a German building to protest Dutch unemployment. 3 arson attempts fail on smaller, less protected buildings, but the 4th attempt on the most important building in Germany goes off without a hitch. The fire engulfs the Reichstag in 20 minutes. All done by one person with a book of matches and a pocket full of firelighters. Van der Lubbe insists he acted alone with unusual intensity, even hunger striking when people don't believe him. The Nazis have emergency legislation ready within 12 hours of the fire. Expert testimony says multiple ignition points and accelerants were absolutely needed. Witnesses see multiple people fleeing the building before Van der Lubbe is arrested. The Nazis controlled tunnels leading directly into the Reichstag.
Schneller! Wir müssen schneller sein! Los! Schneller!
Testimony of Lennings implies Nazi involvement. It gets buried for 64 years by the very historian arguing against Nazi involvement. So could Van der Lubbe have acted completely alone? Most historians say yes, that he was an impulsive radical who got incredibly lucky and the Nazis simply exploited that moment. But I think that explanation ignores the physical evidence and the logical gaps in the story. The fire just spread too fast, and his behavior after the arrest feels like he was protecting someone. Proof of the testimony that contradicts the lone actor theory didn't surface for decades. Maybe Van der Lubbe did light a fire that night, but I think someone else made sure the whole building burned down. Either way, the Nazis got exactly what they wanted: their crisis, their excuse, their legal path to absolute power. And a half-blind Dutch bricklayer from Leiden gave it to them, whether he meant it or not. Today you can visit the Reichstag in Berlin. It was rebuilt after the war. The glass dome was added in the 1990s as a symbol of transparency. You can actually look inside and see the parliamentary chamber below, much like the glass pyramid at the Louvre. There's no memorial to Marinus van der Lubbe. Most people don't even know he was a Dutchman that was involved in the story. In 2007, Germany posthumously pardoned van der Lubbe under a law addressing unjust Nazi-era convictions. But they still don't know, or don't want to tell us, if he acted alone. The story matters because it's a warning about how quickly rights can disappear when people are scared, about how easy it is to blame an outsider, a foreigner, a radical, someone on the margins, and use that blame to justify, just about anything. Whether van der Lubbe was a terrorist, a patsy, or a desperate kid who was manipulated into infamy, one thing is undeniable. His name is attached to the night democracy died in Germany. And whether he meant to be or not, whether he acted alone or was used, a Dutch construction worker from Leiden helped light the match that burned Europe to the ground. Thank you for watching. I'm Henry, and this was What Now?